Hello? Spring has arrived with the forsythia buds starting to peek out. I'm a woman who has just crossed the 50-year mark, and I'm here to share my unique story. Honestly, I've not been very fortunate with men, but later in life I found true love. And that person is, quite unexpectedly, my in-law. Growing up, my family was incredibly poor, barely managing to graduate middle school, while the more affluent kids went on to prep schools for college. High school was a luxury I couldn't afford. I was a good student, but my parents couldn't financially support me. They believed college was only for my brother, sparing every dime for him, despite my desire to study. I couldn't pursue high school due to our financial struggles. With my parents working hard, the thought of attending an academic high school was out of the question. So, at a young age, I started working in factories. Although it was challenging to find one that I could handle at such a tender age. In middle school, I had a friend named Emily, who was keenly aware of my situation. She mentioned her aunt knew many people and could help me find a job. Eventually, through her aunt's recommendation, I landed a job at a factory. Working diligently alongside Emily, I soon turned 20. Emily had a brother and kept saying what a great guy he was, suggesting she introduce us. Back then, unlike today's thriving dining culture with coffee shops and restaurants, meetings often took place in bakeries. The man I was introduced to seemed very cheerful. He worked at his parents' shop. His name was James. After introducing us, Emily said, "You two get along. I'll head home," leaving us alone. James asked, "Sophia, do you like driving?" with a voice as small as an ant's. I said, "Yes," to which he replied, "Great, let's go for a drive outside." James had brought his father's car. At that time, I had never ridden in anyone's car. My entire commuting experience was limited to city buses, and though I dreamed of saving up for a train trip, I hadn't even been on a train. Thinking about it, I was extremely poor. James drove skillfully, suggesting, "Shall we go see the ocean?" I knew I should call my parents, but I thought we would just go to a nearby beach and return the same day. Without contacting my home, I got into James's car. However, he headed towards the sea. When I asked why we were going so far, he said he wanted to take me somewhere with clear sea water and watch the sunrise together. I was naive. First, we went to a lake. "Let's take a look at the lake," he said, and while holding my hand, he looked into my eyes and said, "Let's make this work." Do you understand what I mean? My heart started racing. After meeting up after a Saturday morning shift, and as evening approached, we arrived in Monterey, leaving me anxious about when I would get home. James said, "Don't look at me like I'm some kind of bad guy. We're starting to see each other from today on," to which I replied a bit shyly, "Actually, you seem really approachable, James. I think we'll get along well." As the day turned to night, my stomach grumbled loudly. We ended up having dinner at a nearby restaurant. When I mentioned it was time to head home, he said, "I'm too tired from driving, it'd be dangerous to go back now." Thinking of my strict parents, I wanted to call them. And he waited with me by the payphone. "Mom, I'm out with Emily, her brother and a friend. We're over at the East Coast. We'll stay the night and come back tomorrow." I lied, sensing my mom felt reassured knowing I was with Emily. It felt like the first time I ever lied to my parents. I used to hand over all my earnings from the factory to them, saving just a little for myself. We got through that. James suggested, "How about we take a walk on the beach tonight?" The evening was thrilling, and we ended up booking a room on the spot, an experience straight out of a drama. It was the first time I was alone with a man. James looked at me with warm eyes and asked, "You trust me, right?" I nodded without saying a word. That night, I became James's girl. We barely slept until dawn. Leaving the room in the late Sunday afternoon, the landlady entered the room. We had used, muttering, Looks like I've got some laundry to do," as we just smiled and walked out. From then on, James would pick me up after his shifts at the factory. We saw each other almost every day. He was learning wallpapering and even took up painting. During our sweet romance, I once had a meal with my friend Emily. She remarked, "Looks like things are working out for you too," a comment that lingered in my ears. Why would she set us up and then act jealous after that? Emily started to intrude more on our dates, and they began sharing stories without me. Since James was a friend of her brother's, and they lived in the same neighborhood, they had many shared memories. I've always been quick to catch on after all. I've been working under others since my teens. Hearing Emily say to James, "I loved the white day candy you gave me yesterday," was ridiculous. We were supposed to meet every day, but James had an urgent matter that day. Turns out, Emily had been harboring a crush on James for a long time. I thought to myself, would we really date? But when it turned out to be true, I guess she felt jealous. James then said, "Your gift is in the car," and gave me candy. When I told James, "If you're playing us both, let's end this right here," he and the other person just silently got into their car and left. I can't even begin to express how much I cried at home that day. I was introduced to this man by my best friend, and somehow, on the first day we met, I ended up being his girl, only to find out he was also seeing my friend. I felt so betrayed that I couldn't bring myself to go to work for several days. Then there was this sudden absence of what should have been a monthly occurrence. Waiting brought no news, so I visited the local clinic. The result was that I was pregnant. Seeing the vigorous heartbeat of the baby gave me a new sense of hope. I didn't reach out to James. I completely cut ties with Emily as well. With my parents' support, I raised my daughter. She was incredibly smart, perhaps inheriting it from me. She could do addition at a very young age, and if you taught her one thing, she'd learn 5. Eventually, I was introduced to a man by someone I knew. He was an older, wealthy man who had lost his wife. He felt for my situation and was eager to marry quickly, wanting to raise my daughter together. Fortunately, we got married before my daughter started elementary school, marking my first official marriage. His children were all settled and had been provided with enough to live comfortably. My daughter never missed being at the top of her class in school. She was my everything, my hope. During these happy times, my husband was diagnosed with cancer, not long after my daughter got accepted into a prestigious university. He was an older man but had always been in good health, so it felt like a bolt out of the blue. He left us a substantial inheritance before passing away in front of the whole family, without any disputes over his will. Our daughter, having been an exemplary student, deeply felt the absence of her father. I promised her, "Let's only hold on to the good memories of Dad. Let's try to be strong." I never expected what happened next. My daughter got a job at a major company and brought home a man after about 3 years, saying he was a new recruit in the same department. He was 2 years younger than her, but seemed very upright, and I heard his family background was good. My daughter dated him, and 2 years later, they were planning a wedding. The groom's father was quite the gentleman. However, the mother-in-law was absent. I learned she had sadly passed away 2 years prior. We exchanged contacts since we had to proceed with the wedding. Without a spouse on one side, the kids, being busy with work, suggested that if there were decisions to be made by the adults, we should communicate comfortably. Amidst the busy wedding preparations, I received a call from the groom's father wanting to discuss something about the wedding. We met at a cafe in the afternoon to talk it over. He was quite the gentleman about it. That day, we decided to move from our casual chat to grabbing a drink together. Since the trendy bars frequented by the younger crowd weren't an option, and my daughter was away on a business trip, I invited them over to my place. My in-laws seemed a bit hesitant, wondering if it was all right to come over. My house is always spotless, thanks to the daily efforts of our cleaning lady. So I reassured them it was fine. Upon arriving, my in-law was visibly impressed by the cleanliness of our home. We lost track of time sharing stories about raising kids and the struggles of our youth, not realizing it was past midnight. I offered them to stay in the guest room if they didn't want to head back home late, and that's when they hesitated, asking if it was possible for us to find comfort in each other's company, given our shared loneliness. I welcomed the idea, and we promised to keep our relationship a secret. My in-law turned out to be quite the catch, healthy, masculine, and incredibly charming, to the point where I wished I could see them every day. After our children got married, my in-laws started spending more time at our place, almost like we were newlyweds, while our kids lived in their own homes, visiting only on weekends for meals. One day, we even joked about meeting up all together instead of separately. Our kids were concerned about us being alone, but we brushed it off, saying they should focus on their own lives, and we would keep in touch via phone since we were getting busier. One day, my daughter announced she was pregnant, and I assured her I would take care of the baby, so she shouldn't worry.